Webster Tarpley, Lyndon LaRouche, and John Coleman, the Dope Incorporated crowd. Again, I can be contacted for information. Go to my links, go to the forum, you'll find information on this. Specifically, I noticed back, as I said, I started studying this stuff back in the 80s. I noticed how many rock videos, pop videos, and Madonna's first video, Like a Virgin, being set in Venice is not by accident. It's not just a hot location. There's lots of hot locations in the world. Why there? It's because of ritual symbolism, ritual elements. The blonde female wearing the religious regalia, the religious symbolism. What's really going on? Well, in one thing about Venice is that is where all the young men in the 1500s and in the medieval times, Venice was where you sent all the young dukes and wannabe the princes and the young men to basically lose their virginity and be initiated into manhood in an orgiastic way. They still have this thing called the Carnival of Venus, which is the day before Ash Wednesday, which falls under Aquarius Pisces. That's important for astrological reasons. And the word carnival means to lift the flesh. It's again part of this whole Dionysian orgiastic rites and cults that they have going on. It's a bit of a tourist attraction now, of course, but behind it is something a lot more sinister regarding initiation, sexual rites and practices. And again, this particular aspect of the ritual has been whistleblown in many films, particularly in the work of Federico Fellini, another guy who thinks he's a film director, and by Peter Greenaway, who is a film director. But again, I'm just making jokes here, but obviously if you study their films with a educated eye, Prospero's books, The Draftsman's Contract, you'll start seeing these Dionysian elements, because these, in my opinion, are initiates of this Dionysian cult. Again, as I say, don't necessarily take my word for that. One classic franchise is the James Bond movies. I've listed about, in my mind, there's about 4 of them, at least, that are absolute, that feature Venice, and many other symbols of the Venetians. Moonraker does. Because don't forget, in those movies, you always have these weird, bizarre anti-hero types. And the symbolism surrounding them is particularly interesting. Super wealthy oligarchs. If you remember the movie The Spy Who Loved Me, the super wealthy oligarch in that film actually lived on a undersea domicile that he called Atlantis. The whole Atlantis symbolism came up there. And in fact, I'd love to be able to have the time to take you through a scene by scene in that film to show you just what they whistleblow and how brilliant it is. But the interesting thing from what Jordan Maxwell has always brought out is that the character is actually dressed in a long black robe, sitting in a Venetian drawing room, in exactly the same way as you might have seen the Medicis, with all of this Botticelli's artwork all around him, in a place called Atlantis. I mean, it's incredible. And then you often see the character, he actually has webbed hands, by the way, implying that he's a hybrid character. And then you often see him, behind him is the checkerboard. There's actually clips in the film where you see the black and white checkerboard. Yeah, there's the makeshift submerged domicile in which this person resides, known as Atlantis. A lot of whistleblowing goes on there. Of course, the famous one is their criminal syndicate, Spectre. The group that plays one side against the other. Their symbol there on the signet ring is the octopus. And this term, octopus, turned up again in one of the James Bond movies, Octopussy, which is very interesting from a symbolic point of view, because anybody who knows this movie, what does it show? It shows literally a ritualistic cult of women being groomed to be literally high-class prostitutes, specially trained. And they situate it in the East as well. This is kind of interesting. But even in the West, I've got questions about the Playboy and the Penthouse groups. Who are they connected to? What does the term mansion and penthouse refer to, you see? Who's running these groups? Not just those magazines, but so many other media outlets. This particular Venusian symbolism is just rampant. This is, you saw Venus rising out of the shell as Botticelli and others had painted her. Well, here you have it again in a different form, but it's particularly Venusian. And just again, as we said, the permeation of the occult symbolism appearing religious. But it's much more than that. You know, Jesus wore the crown of thorns. He was a man. So if you change the symbolism of a woman, that's significant. It means something. It's not particularly religious. Neither is this. So as we said when we saw the hideous images last time we met, the blood on the models at first glance implies that they've been murdered. But then, as we said, there's a double layer to that. And again, pay attention to the symbolism. Pay attention to the facial expressions of these people when they appear in ad copy. It will tell you volumes when you know what you're looking for. There's a lot of tie-in to astrology and tarot. For instance, here's a clip from Madonna's stage show. And yet that's right out of the tarot, the Queen of Swords. So many examples of this kind of thing, but we only have can dip into it only very, very briefly. The kind of blatant tie-ins to archetypal symbolism. In the movie Live and Let Die, a James Bond whistleblowing movie set in New Orleans, by the way, another massive ritual place, you see this character who is works with the tarot cards, by the way, and is a prophetess type person based straight out of the tarot, the high priestess. You'll find that very same symbol in numerous advertisements, drawing upon the esoteric arcane tradition. Let us never forget that they know things. They are initiates into this stuff. And we have to ask a couple of questions about why the gentleman prefers blondes. What are the ritual elements here? It's because it's part of an ancient ritual. And if you're familiar with the work of, anybody heard of Michael Hoffman II, his books on white slavery? Very important author to know about. Go on the internet, Michael Hoffman II, and check out his interviews and his books. Phenomenal into the question of white slavery. And you'll be shocked to find out what again has been hidden from you in that light, in that area. But again, we have the very famous people's champions, the very great iconic cult status females, noted for their blondness. Do you know how long the list is of the blonde actresses, the platinum blondes? We can only point to a few here, like Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield, of course. Jane Mansfield, deeply involved with Anton LaVey, a personal friend of Anton LaVey and an initiate of the Satanic Church, Anton LaVey's Satanic Church. We have Peg Entwistle from 1932. She acted in a movie called 13 Women, which was loaded with occult themes. As a matter of fact, I think she committed suicide. Her death was extremely bizarre and is still a noted bizarre case to this day. We have Janet Leigh, who's appeared in numerous bizarre films, Psycho, Touch of Evil, and others. We have Kim Novak. Study the movies they've been in, follow their tradition. We have Lana Turner, of course. Not all of them have been in movies that are occult, but again, this is the very symbol of the blonde-haired female. Why is it so ubiquitous? It's so close to us we don't think about it. We never question it. Susan Kerr Weld, also known as Tuesday Weld. And a person I've been studying since the 80s, since I first studied the Rolling Stones, was Marianne Faithfull. Her occult symbolism is very, very interesting. She was actually an associate of Mary Ann de Grimston, Mary Ann McLean. They were friends. And Marianne Faithfull used to go to their headquarters to take drugs and to hang out with the de Grimstons during the swinging 60s. And of course she was a very close associate of not just Mick Jagger, but all of the members of the Rolling Stones. This is more of an up-to-date photograph of her. There she is wearing the pentagram, sort of a black flower pentagram. And just as a passing anecdote, by the way, her name is Marianne Faithfull. Sound is also very important. Arrangement of words and letters and phonemes and syllables. You'll often notice that magicians have this 3-2 thing going. Because it's musical, the mind remembers it. Marianne Faithfull. Right? Eliphas Levi. MacGregor Mathers. Aleister Crowley. Right? Pay attention to the symbolism. It's very important.